This video tutorial is compatible with Photoshop CC and Photoshop CS6. If you're getting tired of your character-free multi-megapixel images from your DSLR, then try this toy camera effect. It's called the Faux Holger style, and we're going to give it a go on this Brooklyn Bridge image I've got here. First thing we're going to do to emulate the Holger camera, which this technique is based on, is crop it to a square format. Okay, because the images produced by this camera are indeed square. So we'll just come over to the crop tool, and I'll select that, and I've also got the 1:1 square format selected from the presets here. We might just need to nudge that along so that the bridge is directly in center. You can see the center mark there before we commit the crop. If you don't want to hang on to the pixels either side, then we can just check that delete cropped pixels checkbox there before we commit the crop. Okay, and now we've got our square image. I'm going to come over to the layers panel, and we're duplicating this layer. Command J or Control J on a PC will give you that duplicate layer, and we're just going to call this blur. Okay, and the reason we're blurring some of this image is the Holger camera has a single lens element, and we get some serious streaking of image quality, especially in the corners of the image. So we're going to do this via a mixture of two blur filters. The first one will be Filter, Blur, and then come in and choose Radial Blur, and this will drag the corner quality nicely. This is an older style filter, and we don't actually have a preview of the effects, so we're actually going to not want to center the effect. We're actually going to want to create a little bit of a sharp focus or sharper focus towards the lower third of the image. So I'm just going to click inside of the blur center here and drag that down to approximate where the people are crossing the bridge before selecting OK. Now I've got an amount of 3. I've got the zoom effect checked, and we're just going for good quality rather than best, and I'll select OK. Okay, and so there's you can see there's considerable streaking towards the edges, and that fades off as we come towards the center of the image. Okay, I'm going to create a stamp visible layer now, because one of the other things that this lens does is it tends to diffuse and glow some of the light passing through the single lens element, especially the highlights. So in order to emulate this effect, we'll apply it to a separate layer. So in order to create that stamp visible layer, I'll use that keyboard shortcut. Command Option Shift on a Mac, or Control Alt Shift on a PC, and with those three modifier keys held down, just press the letter E on the keyboard, and that creates our stamp visible. Okay, I'm just going to rename this layer Glow and click to one side to commit that name. Now before we go into the diffuse glow filter, it's important to set the foreground and background colors to their default settings. Just press D on the keyboard to do that, and then come up to the filter menu and choose the filter gallery. Okay, we're in the distort section here, the distort folder, and we want to fit this in view. So just 1 minute while I fit that in view. Okay, and we're just going for a single filter, which is the diffuse glow. Graininess I'm going to set at 0, because we're going to apply a separate layer to control grain, which will emulate the film used in the Holger camera. We're using a glow amount of 4 and a clear amount of 17. Now you might need to fine-tune this with different images depending on the highlight values you got in. If your glow amount is too high, then it'll pick up a lot of extra tones in the image, not just the highlights but some of the mid-tones as well. So we will want to keep that reasonably low just to emulate the Faux Holger effect. And we'll select OK to apply this filter to this layer. Okay, these two layers combined I'm going to put into a group, so I'm just going to hold down the Shift key as I select the layer below, and then I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut on a Mac, Command G, Control G on a PC to put those into a group. I'm just going to add a layer mask to this group. This will allow me to shield some of the blur and glow from selected areas of the image. I'll come back to this one later. Okay, the next step I'm going to do is to add that noise that we refrained from adding in that diffuse glow filter dialog. So in order to do this, I'm going to hold down the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC and click on the Create a New Layer icon. And we'll just name this Grain. And we'll put the mode to Overlay. And we'll check the Fill with Overlay Neutral Color 50% Grey checkbox and select OK. Although it's a grey layer, it is actually neutral or invisible in the overlay blend mode, but we're now going to apply the grain to this layer. Okay, so we're going to come up to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and I'm going to choose quite a high amount, 7%, and I'm using the Gaussian option, and also the monochromatic is checked before selecting OK. Now if we just zoom in, I'm going to zoom in to actual pixels, you'll see that grain. Okay, you might find that it's a little bit severe, especially on low resolution images, so you might want to drop that. I'm going to drop that opacity down to 50%. Another way of approaching this grain is to actually add it inside of Adobe Camera Raw before we even open the image. Okay, I'm just going to fit on screen again. Okay, and before we proceed with the next step. Okay, the next step is to add a vignette. Okay, and to do this I'm going to add or select the rectangular marquee tool, and we're going to put in a 250 pixel feather in the options bar there. I'm going to click in the upper left hand corner of the image and drag down to the lower right, and then let go of my mouse button. Okay, we're going to inverse this selection, so we go to Select, Inverse, just so we've got the outer portions of that image selected. And now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut to copy the merged. This command actually exists here, but I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut. On the Mac that's Command Shift C, on a PC Control Shift C, and that copies the visible pixels to the clipboard rather than the pixels on this grain layer. And then if I come back in with the paste command, that's Command V on a Mac or Control V on a PC, that pastes them to a new layer. Let's double click on this new layer and we'll call it Vignette. Okay, now you won't see the vignette until we change the blend mode, and we're going to change the blend mode to Multiply. And this darkens the edge of the frame down nicely. You can lower the opacity if you find the effect is a little bit strong, but I'm going to leave mine at maximum 100% opacity for this project. Next step we're going to go is the color grading. Because it's a film process, a lot of the people who are using these plastic toy Holger cameras will often cross-process or process the films in the wrong chemicals, and so we're going to emulate this poor processing or incorrect processing with some color grading. Okay, and the first way we're going to kick in is I'll just select the adjustments here, and we'll come in with a levels adjustment. Now I've already got a preset created for this Holger look, so I'm just going to load it from my presets here and click on Holger, and quite quickly you can see the drama or cross-process look appear. Now I'll just walk you through some of the settings I've used here. We're in the RGB channel here, and I've set the black input slider to 20 and the white input slider to 235. Okay, in the red channel we've got a gamma adjustment of 1.10. In the green channel I've got output levels assigned here, 40 and 230. Okay, and finally, probably the most severe of the adjustments here is in the blue channel, and we've got output levels of 64 and 190. And if you want to create a preset, just click on the flyout menu here, and we can then save that as a preset. I've called mine the Holger preset for levels. Okay, we're going to come in with some more adjustment layers now, so let's just go back to the adjustments panel, and I'm going to come in with a hue saturation adjustment. And rather than doing a global saturation, we're going to leave that for the vibrance adjustment feature that follows this. We're going to select the reds channel. In the hue, I'm going to dial that down to -10 just to shift the color values of those hues. And we're going to move the saturation to +15. Okay, as I said, we were going to make a global vibrance adjustment, so we'll come back to the adjustments panel and choose the vibrance icon there, and we'll raise that vibrance slider to a very generous plus 50 there to create some beautiful saturated colors inside of this image. And then finish up to get some extra drama from this color grading. I'll go back to my adjustments panel, select the brightness and contrast. You could do this using curves or an S curve, and we'll just raise the contrast there. Again, another healthy setting of 50 in that contrast. Okay, now if we return to the layers panel, you'll see we have 4 adjustment layers contributing to this color grading. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the levels, the original adjustment layer there, so that all are selected. And then I'll place these into a group as well. Remember the keyboard shortcut, Command G on a Mac or Control G on a PC. And I'm going to add a layer mask to this group as well. Okay, now we're going to try and restore some of the original color, which is still sitting on the background layer. Like if I hold down the Alt or Option key and click on the visibility icon, you'll see where we've come from, both some tonal color grading and also some distortion. Okay, so let's protect some of the detail, perhaps the pedestrians on the bridge, and also the flag up here. So I'm just going to select the brush tool, and I'm going to select black as my foreground color. I'm going to lower the opacity to 50% in the options bar. I'm using a nice soft brush here. The hardness is set to 0%. And I'll just come in, I'll just increase the size of the brush slightly using the close square bracket key, 2 alongside from the P key. And I'll just brush over these pedestrians on the bridge, maybe a couple of passes to give a little bit of additional sharpness there. I'm just going to go up the center of that bridge just to recover a small amount of detail in that brickwork there. And then reducing the size of the brush, I'm just going to stroke the flag, the stars and stripes there, just a couple of times, just to restore a little bit of sharpness up there on the flagpole. Okay, now I'm happy with the extra sharpness in the areas that I want it. I can now come over to the group mask here, and I'm just going to shield some of the colors that are just spiking a little bit too aggressively for me. So again, with the brush tool, just increase the size slightly, and then I'll just brush over these pedestrians. I don't want quite so much saturation down there. Okay, and that's good. Okay, now we're going to finish this project off. One of the characteristic effects of the Holger camera is it does tend to clip some of the edges of the image because the lens is recessed. So we're going to emulate this. Again, we'll pick up the rectangular marquee tool, and I'll choose a feather of 150 pixels. Moving just a little bit closer to the corner this time around, I'm going to click and then drag down to the lower right hand side. Okay, and when I've got the that central portion selected, I can let go of my mouse button. If I hold down the space bar before letting go of the mouse button, I can actually float this selection around if it's not quite accurate the first time around. And now I'll let go of the mouse button, and again I need to inverse that selection. Okay, keyboard shortcut, Command Shift I on a Mac or Control Shift I on a PC, so we have the outer edges selected. Okay, and we're going to create a new layer here. This will be Vignette 2, so I'll just type that in so we can keep a track of what's going on in the layers panel there. And now I'm just going to zoom out. I'm just going to use the Command minus or Control minus on a PC just to zoom this image out a couple of times, and I'll just collapse that layers panel. We're coming up to the select menu and choosing transform selection. This is not the free transform, this is the transform selection, because we're not transforming pixels but just this active selection we've got here. Now I'm going to hold down the Command key on a Mac or the Control key on a PC, and I'm going to click on one of these corner handles on the bounding box of the selection, and I'm going to drag it diagonally up to the right hand side there, just so this inner selection just touches the corner of my canvas. And I'll also do the same with the lower left hand side there, and just let go, and that's about right for this one. and then we'll commit that transformation. So we now have this odd shaped selection here. Let's come zoom back in a couple of times, Command plus on a Mac or Control plus on a PC, and then we're just going to fill this selection with black, or the foreground color that we've got selected here. So we'll come up to the edit menu, choose fill. That's a Shift F5 keyboard shortcut, and we'll choose either black or as I say, the foreground color, which just happens to be black, and I'll select OK. Blend mode is currently set to multiply, but that doesn't really matter, it can actually be normal, and we'll just select OK. And then from the select menu, choose deselect. Okay, now if this is a little bit strong, the clipping, as you can see it's really quite severe in the corners there, we can lower the opacity, but remember the amount of distortions you get from the actual Holger camera are not subtle either, so it doesn't really matter if we're getting in really quite aggressive with some of these adjustments. Okay, and finally we're going to do one additional, sort of an optional extra if you like. We're going to create another empty new layer. This layer is going to help us simulate a light leak into the back of the camera. Some of these cameras aren't actually light tight, and so when light seeps in through the black plastic covering, it fogs the film, which creates a characteristic sort of streaking, and we're going to emulate that. Okay, so I'm just going to call this light leak, and we're going to set the blend mode of this light leak layer to screen, like so. Now we'll select the gradient tool from the options bar, and I'm going to come back in. I'm going to select an orange color from the bridge here, or you can actually just select one from the color picker by clicking on the foreground color swatch here. I'm just going to hold down the Option or Alt key and select that center orange, and this is going to be the color for my light leak, which are characteristically orange. Okay, so I'm just going to click in the top right hand corner there and drag through the image to create this light leak effect. You can create it on one side, or we can really go to town and drag an additional one on the lower left hand side. It's a little bit strong. Again, we can just lower the opacity of that light leak layer, and then collapse to see the finished version. Okay, and that concludes the Faux Holger effect that we've applied to this Brooklyn Bridge image. It looks good on a variety of images, but you probably do need to come in and interact with some of these layers. Now also remember that this whole step to get through to this process is available as a single click action from the markgaler.com website.